Hello.
Hello, Jan.
Hello, Artem. So, yeah, my proposal for this conversation was after you have been coaching me for a while, and you said that or you requested that you had a want
Tes-
about
Testimonial.
have testimonial. Yes,
Mm.
that's the word. Yeah. And I suggested that why don't we record a conversation where I ask you how you got into coaching, and so I thought that could be an interesting conversation because I don't know how you got into it, and I'm curious also what kind of coaching. Of course, I've experienced it, and I found it really helpful. Um, so, but I don't know anything. I don't know much about your background. Of course, I've seen you a lot of videos you have done uh, with um, with other people, and I've really enjoyed them and how you relate to people and how you come into this conversation in a very i- like you seem prepared always when you start out with somebody. So, and really enjoyed those publications you made about or in the videos. So, um, yeah. So I guess I'm curious how or when you started your journey and when the coaching came into existence for you.
Mm. Yeah, man. I appreciate your curiosity and kind of inquiry and proposal to have this conversation. So I just wanted to say that. And
Mm.
in regards to coaching, um, yeah, I feel like I've, you know, came across coaching in my own life here and there. And Um, I think like one of my first times actually getting coached myself was through Tony Robbins
Mm.
program, and I still
Mhm.
remember this guy, and he was awful. Like he was there was a point where he was like, and it was over the phone, right? It was kind of before Zoom, so it was just
Ah.
talking to somebody on the phone. And yeah, he just kind of started by like asking me questions around like Tony Robbins philosophy, and then when I got the question wrong, he was just like eh. He did like a buzzer sound, and he's proceeded to correct me and tell me what what I the real answer was. And I was just like, whoa.
Oh,
Yeah, so I had this kind of really bad experience, and I just I ended up hitting them up, and I was like, you guys need to switch this coach because this coach is not, I can't do it. And then they gave me somebody else who
ah,
she was a lot better than
mm,
he was. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I was just wasn't open to coaching, or it was just that whole first experience was just kind of put me off. So
uh-huh.
I gave those sessions to my wife, my girlfriend at the time, and I gave it to her. I was like, "Here, you do these sessions," and she enjoyed them, and whatever, they were helpful for her. So that was kind of my first interaction with coaching. And
Mm.
yeah, I would see coaching kind of everywhere popping up, and yeah, it's just like
So when was this? This was quite early, I imagine, when almost before coaching was a thing.
well, I think coaching has been around for I want to say it's been around for several decades, but this must have been um I want to say this was probably like around 8 years ago or something like that. It was probably in the beginning of when I was really starting to get into
Mm.
personal growth. So
Uh-huh.
yeah, like I went to like a Tony Robbins event, and then like signing up to the event, you got it came with
Huh,
coaching sessions.
let's
Um,
see.
yeah.
So that was initially an experience. What I'm hearing is that you wanted to do something with personal growth, and then you had a horrible first experience, and that would what what made you come around to initially to try to be coached?
Yeah, I don't think I was trying to be coached, but I think there was just free sessions. Like, they came,
Ah,
I went to it was like the Tony Robbins event and it was included in the event. So it was like free sessions. I was like, all right, I'll take them. So I tried it out and was just not, yeah,
mhm.
it just didn't resonate. Um, yeah,
So
and
what made you go to the event? If you remember initially, what's the drive behind I'm gonna go to this event and just check it out, or was it very yeah, I'm gonna go to the event and I have a purpose, or I'm curious about the motivation, I guess.
mm, yeah, hard to kind of, you know, go back and really know exactly what it was, but I think I had this sense of wanting to grow, wanting to develop, wanting to be better.
Mm-hmm.
And Tony Robbins was, I feel like he's a gateway for a lot of people into like
Mm-hmm.
personal growth. He certainly was for me. And I feel like when people first get into these kind of things, there are these big figures, there are these people that are kind of popular and out there, and you're like, oh, who, how can I develop? How can I be better? Oh, Tony Robbins, of course. That's the pathway
Yeah,
in. So
yeah.
yeah, so I just ended up going to I think it was Unleash the Power Within, which is like his um
Mm,
like gateway event. And I think that was actually the biggest one he had uh at that point. It was like 15,000 people. It was in New Jersey in a huge stadium, and yeah, it was
mm,
fun. It was a lot of fun. Met some cool people there, and
mm,
it was cool. But looking back now, it's like a very kind of surface level beginner kind of personal growth path, which at the time
mm,
was what I needed. But now it's like,
mm.
it's something different.
Yeah. So at some point, so so you had this, sounds like a good experience. Like you met some good people or some cool people, and so and after that, you began your own coaching practice, or what happened
No,
after the initial? No.
no. I mean, personal growth thing has been already kind of happening for me. And then after that, I was, just kept doing the things I was doing, reading books, meditating, working on myself, doing different courses,
Mhm,
different events, went to some other
mhm,
retreats. Um,
mhm,
yeah, I don't know. Coaching was like kind of always somewhere around, like, it was around there. And um, it's interesting, like looking back, I feel like um, I always had this propensity to want to be a coach or to do or to help people, right? To help people
mhm,
grow, to help people develop. But there was always
mhm,
like a resistance to it. There was something about it that just
mm,
was off. And then having that experience was it almost like illuminated that. It's like, oh, I don't want to be like this guy, right? I don't want to be
uh-huh,
like him.
uh-huh.
So yeah, I don't know. It was just this like I was
Do
into
you- Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, I was into development, but then there was all this resistance around somebody
Yeah,
coaching me or I wasn't even considering honestly being a coach, but I had resistance to being coached.
yeah. So on the path of all meditation and reading and personal growth, as you say, you had also some experiences of being coached, and I imagine also you probably were around people who did the work
Yeah,
or experienced them.
Yeah,
And you said also you wanted to help people.
yeah, I think, I think how I was noticing this is, so before all this was happening, I was actually pursuing like a career in rap. So I wanted to like make it big in
Mm,
rap. That was something that I did for a while, and there was like a 3-year period where I was pretty serious about it.
mhm,
But at that point, like before then, I was, just drinking, smoking, partying, through my
mm,
early 20s, just doing a bunch of, stuff that young people do kind of.
yeah,
And
yeah,
at the point where I already got serious about music, I
mm,
started kind of cleaning up. Like I wasn't going out to clubs and getting drunk, but it's, which is kind of ironic because a lot of kind of hip hop culture and rap culture is about partying. It's about, drinking,
yeah,
smoking, and all that. So that was still kind of around me, but I was already
mm,
kind of like beyond that. So,
uh,
being around that was just weird. It was like a misfit to what I felt like what I was stepping into. And then
uh-huh.
I was just around
So
people. Yeah, the one more thing
it,
is just I was around people that were just doing like, from my perspective, silly things or just making poor
mm,
decisions. So I'd be like, why are you doing that? Or like, why are you doing this? So it already felt
uh-huh,
like I had this like bigger kind of awareness where I was like, questioning or, starting to question people. So now, like, looking
mhm,
back on that, I'm like, oh, like I was already kind of in that space of like
uh-huh.
wanting
So
to
you
help people.
started to clean up around that when your music took off.
Yeah.
Uh, and was that at the time? Was that kind of before you stepped into personal growth work, or was it overlapping?
I think I already started to kind of dive into it. Um, I think at the around that time that I was also like getting deeper into music, I was doing
Mm,
jujitsu, and I started doing jujitsu with this one kid, and he was like a year older than me, and he was really
mhm,
into personal growth, and he was like the first
uh-huh,
person I met that was like into that, like really
mm,
hardcore.
mm,
So I was just like, oh, this is really cool. Like I'm interested in this stuff too, and now I'm meeting somebody who's like, you know, deeper into it than I am, and he was like introducing me to different books and different practices and stuff like that. So I was getting into it, but the thing with rap is it consumed so much of my energy, and it put me in certain
mm,
environments and around certain people that I couldn't really go deeper into it. So
mhm,
when the whole rap stuff kind of wasn't working out for me and I felt like I had to pivot, that opened up a
mm,
lot of space to now read
mm,
more, to meditate, and to like really go
mm.
deeper into these kind of different practices.
Okay, so it sounds like you kind of uh, that you stumble over personal growth work in a way that you were kind of connected to by accident. You found somebody who showed you stuff that you seemed interested in.
Yeah, I don't know if it was by accident. I mean, that the whole thing of whether things happen by accidents or if there aren't any coincidences, that whole thing, I'm not sure. Um, I was already, there was something inside me that was, I remember at one point, there was something in me where I was like, oh, this isn't enough. And it was the sense that I didn't know anything. I'm like, you don't know anything. And I
uh,
don't remember the exact thing that it was, but I think it was like a conflict between a friend or something like that. And I was
uh-huh,
like, oh, I just need to know more about relationships, or I need to be
uh-huh,
better. Like, and I
uh-huh,
remember the first book I picked up, like one of those books that I picked up in that moment was, it was like how to win friends and influence people by Dale
yeah.
Carnegie. Very like
Mhm,
classic, personal, but that was like one of the, and I remember having that moment and then picking that book up. So I already
mhm,
had this like bug. Um,
mhm,
Before that, I went to, college. Like I finished college, and I went to school obviously for 12 years. And the whole time where I was in school, it was just like, I don't want to be here. Why am I doing this? These
mhm,
teachers, these professors are not engaging me.
mhm,
So I never really wanted to learn. It always felt like I was kind of like I had to be there, but I didn't want to
Uh-huh.
learn. And it was when I got out of college and I wasn't being forced to read a specific thing or learn a specific thing, my like
Yeah.
innate curiosity was just like, oh, I want to know more about X, Y, and
Uh-huh.
Z.
So you had the drive for learning and developing,
Yeah.
and you said that there was something inside me that already I heard it as you had a sense of awareness that was kind of developing when you get out of the certain environments that maybe I imagine wasn't too good for a lot of reasons.
Yeah.
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 And from there on you, and this is how many years is this?
Yeah. So I
Like
want
when
to,
the moment when you picked up that book and it was kind of deliberately starting to study this
say
kind
that
of.
was maybe like a good 10 years ago. I can't say exactly, but I would want to say like a good 10 years ago. That's when I remember that moment was like, must have been like 24, 25. So something like 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm,
And then really when I really went deeper into kind of personal development was maybe a couple years later. Um,
mm-hmm,
because like that's I want to say like 27. That's when I was like, all right, this, from like I think from like 24 to 27, I was really doing the rap stuff. And then like at
mm-hmm.
27, it was kind of like, all right, this is not kind of working out. I got to figure out other things. And that's
Oh,
when I really was like, all right, now I'm going all in on this. So that
oh,
was maybe like a good 9, 8 years ago. And I was just, yeah, just became kind of consumed by that whole world.
uh-huh. Consumed by that whole world. And I imagine that I also heard you say like you were going on retreats and reading more and meditating more and like and you were consumed by it also. You said like, and I'm curious, when did you start to, if you want to have like when was the moment when you, if you can remember, when you suddenly like, oh, this is starting to do something with me? Or do you have any specific memories when you, is it a process or is it like, did you have a huge insight at some point when you when something that shifted or something like that in doing this work?
Yeah. I mean, I think there was definitely something of like when I already started kind of engaging, and I think it was around that time when I uh, met the dude that was my jujitsu teacher, and like I started doing that stuff. Something in me was already kind of shifting. I was like, I want to be more positive. I want to do more. I kind of I was already into wellness and I was already working out, so I was healthy, and I feel like that's a
Mm.
big foundation where a
Uh-huh.
lot of people around me didn't have that foundation. So that kind
Uh-huh.
of made me, I don't know, there's something about like taking care of your body and working out, being in fitness. It kind of, there's a generative kind of like upward spiral to like do better or just, have better habits. So there was that
Yeah.
kind of shift. And then I was doing the jujitsu. I was into that kind of wellness stuff. And then,
So there was a sense of embodiment from quite early when you got into that kind of training and wellness.
yeah, I always been very physical my whole life. um at around 12 years old, I had like a little belly, like I had a little belly fat, like, you know what I'm saying, you get like the little
Yeah.
fat just from I was just like eating whatever, and I started to get a little chunky, and I was like, oh, I don't like this, like at 12 years old, I'm like, I don't like this belly. And I think one of the people I kind of used to look up to when I was younger was Arnold Schwarzenegger, and he was like this
Ah.
muscular built dude. And I was
Yeah.
like, I want to be, and he was like this actor and he was successful. And I was like, oh, I want to be like this guy. So
Uh-huh.
at 12 years old, like I remember having this fat, like a little bit of fat on my body, and I was like, oh, I want to get a six pack. So I started watching what I was eating. I forgot how I did it because like I was watching how many grams of fat I was eating. Like I don't know how
Oh,
I did it
really dedicated.
at 12
Really?
years old, and I started doing
Wow.
100. I did like 100 sit-ups every single day. My brother would hold my legs, and in a month, I think I lost like 10 pounds, and I got a
Wow.
six pack. And ever since then, like I had to have that six pack, and like I was into like I would do pull-ups, I would I'd work out, and then
That's quite early age, 12
yeah,
years
yeah,
old, and having that kind of dedication.
yeah. I think
Yeah.
I think there was something innate in that sense of
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that was just something like innate. It wasn't something, like for some people it's like, oh, I have to work so hard to do this. It was just,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, it's just I guess like a strength. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And so that doing the jujitsu was kind of a build on that kind of trend in your life, or your skills being very physical.
Yeah, yeah. I think it was a development actually because before I got into jujitsu, I was just lifting weights, right? So
Mm,
I was just kind of lifting weights and wanting to be big, and then
mm,
going to do jujitsu, it was more like, okay, well, lifting all these weights is not making you better at, it's not making you a better fighter. It's not making you actually and it's
no,
funny because some of my motivation to lift weights was actually like I want to be big, so people don't
mm,
mess with me kind of thing. Um,
yeah, yeah,
so then doing jiu-jitsu was like, hey, like being big doesn't mean that you know how to fight. It doesn't mean that you know how to move.
mm,
It doesn't mean that I would have like shoulder issues and tightness in my hips and all this stuff. So like going into that was like, wow, there's a whole
mm,
other world of physicality and movement
uh-huh,
that's way more complex and nuanced, and it's not just
uh-huh,
about, oh, I'm so big I could lift weights. so
yeah.
so like
There's something, yeah.
go ahead.
There's something about like much more nuance and the movement, and that kind of almost when I heard it, you use those words, it sounds like the perfect like an entrance into spirituality, like
Mm,
in the sense of that nuance and more fine-tuned movements and stuff like that. So
yeah,
it makes sense for me that you kind of went from there into personal growth.
yeah. It's funny because there is a way it ends up connecting to spirituality, but the way I was even thinking about it is just it's like a development. It's like an increasing complexity.
Hmm.
The whole going to the gym and lifting weights and like being a bro and like, oh, let's go, bro, we're gonna drink some
Yeah,
protein shake. It's a very simplistic
yeah,
thing, and it's good because it's better to do that than to like be out drinking and smoking. And
yeah.
but
And
there's a
also, what's occurred for me is like because I can totally relate. I did the same thing for years.
yeah,
I lifted weights
yeah,
6 times a week,
yeah, yeah,
and I remember how mechanical
yeah,
sense it was. Like it's very mechanical and it's very isolated. And of course, you have to do more and more to grow and to be big. But and the other thing in jujitsu, I imagine, because I did that too in my early years. So, but I didn't succeed very well at it. But uh, it was something, and there's when the nuance and the complexity, as you were saying, comes into the more it's I guess the distinction is the mechanical and the more nuanced, and the complexity is two different ways of being in a way. I'm curious if how that resonates for you in your
yeah,
experience.
yeah. There's something about jiu-jitsu in particular that there's a
Mm,
very like flowing kind of thing There's a very
mm,
organic kind of flowing energy. And um, it's interesting because when and I don't think I ever became like really good. But one of the things, being somebody who lifted weight and always like pushed themselves, you come in and you try to do this kind of mechanical strength based stuff,
mhm,
and it
mm,
just doesn't work because you have people that understand the techniques and they will use your strength against you. Um,
mhm, aha,
so yeah, so there is something of like learning to flow with the person's body and to go with
mm,
the energy, and to actually, there's moments where you allow somebody to overcome you, and
mhm,
you don't try to like force you don't try to use force.
mm,
You go with the energy, and then you use that energy to put them in
mm,
a lock, or put them in a position that is advantageous to you, but you have to know how to flow with the energy. So I think you're
yeah,
right. There is this way more organic, holistic
mhm,
sense, and like it's a kinesthetic
yeah,
intelligence that you have to learn, that
mhm,
it's far more complex than like anybody can,
mm,
kind of lift the weight, but to
mhm,
learn to move in this kind of way, it takes
mm.
far more of that kinesthetic intelligence.
Yeah, I can see you're getting more and more engaged, how you use your hands, and I also imagine that that did something also how, like, or I imagine, but uh, like doing that kind of shift from the more mechanical into the more flow and learning the flow, as you said, like how did that, do you have a sense that what that did to your perception or how you viewed things, like or how did the world look, or do you have any like recollection or any sense of what, if there was a perceptual shift in how you view things?
Yeah, I don't know if I was like able to apply that outside of physicality or movement at the time, at least, like when I but the main shift was like really shifting of like how I moved and how I exercised and how I used my body, and realizing that the stuff I was doing before was very
Mm,
simplistic and very mechanical. And yeah, it
mm,
made me feel good, it made me look big, but there was no functionality. I had this muscle, but I wasn't functional with it. So that
mm,
jujitsu kind of introduced me to this concept of functionality, right? Like
uh-huh.
you can be strong, but you could also have functionality in that strength, or you could be strong and not have functionality. Um,
So can we
yeah,
zoom in on that term functionality, because
yep,
that's, I imagine that, or when you use that term functionality, so is that a part of the movement and the shift of energy and the flow? Is that what you, is that the label of functionality? Like, is that a part of the term functionality? I guess I'm asking.
yeah. I'm not sure. The way I think that I hold functionality is the fact that um, it's like, as humans, we do certain things. We need to get
Mm,
certain things done, right? Throughout our
mm,
daily lives. And
mm,
even like, potentially defending yourself is not something that you might not get into a lot of fights in your life, especially as an adult. That might not be
mm,
something that's there, but um, that also is a potential thing that could happen. So what I mean
mm,
by functionality is that you can learn a certain skill, or you could develop a certain strength, and then you could use it in a wide variety of ways. So even
yeah.
like picking up boxes, right? Like you can get really strong at lifting things, but
Mm,
you still don't know exactly how to use your body, where you can pick up boxes, or you could bend over and
uh-huh.
pick things up in a functional, skillful way where you don't
Uh-huh.
hurt yourself, right? So that's
Yeah.
what I mean by functional.
So you have a kind of a versatile, like a versatile ways, and you have, I also hear in that, like you have a good connection to your body, and you know how to apply and how to flow with manipulating the environment, like yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure, like, when you talk about that, what comes up to me is kinesthetic intelligence. And kinesthetic
Mm-hmm.
intelligence is your ability to understand how the body moves and works and do more
Yeah,
nuanced kind of movements. I
yeah,
don't I mean, I've definitely met different people throughout my life. So the only way to kind of compare my own kinesthetic intelligence is to compare other people. But I don't think I ever had like a high kinesthetic intelligence. Even like my brother, he's more I would say he's more kinesthetically intelligent naturally than I
mm,
am. And then, of
mm-hmm.
course, you have people that become athletes, your Michael Jordans, your Mike Tysons,
Yeah, yeah,
Anderson Silvers, whatever. These are
yeah,
usually that people that become pro athletes, they have very
yeah.
high, LeBron James, very high kinesthetic intelligence. And that's
Uh-huh.
part of why they're able to become so great. So I don't think I ever
Yeah.
had like very high kinesthetic intelligence. It was,
Mm.
I've definitely met people. I was like, okay, this person does not know what they're doing with their body at all. But
So
yeah,
how does at a certain point after doing that, uh, like how how was when did because this was a precursor for the personal growth.
it was happening at the same time, right? Like
Uh-huh.
it was around that time when I probably had the moment with wanting to read, um, wanted to read more, like reading the Dale Carnegie book. It was all kind of happening that, and because the jujitsu trainer, he was really into personal growth. I was kind of
Uh-huh.
like he was rubbing
Yeah.
off on me too, and yeah, it was
Mm.
just kind of it was happening the same, but it was still very early. Like I was still it was also around that time where I was starting to take rap more seriously. So it was these kind
Mm.
of like convergence of different influence. You got rap and me getting really entrenched
Ah.
into rap. You got personal growth, jiu-jitsu, wellness, and these things kind of colliding, and some of them not necessarily being congruent. They're almost being like different
Mm.
movements. There was the whole like, I'm gonna go hang out with people and smoke a blunt, or
Yeah.
hang out with a rap crew, or I'm gonna go do jiu-jitsu and go read a book. Kind of different
Yeah.
movements.
Yeah. So that of course, like you're setting up like how you coached me was through internal family systems. And when I hear you speak about the different pulls in your life, it may be not a coincidence why you choose internal family systems as a modality to your coaching.
Before it was an accident. Now it's not a coincidence. Yeah. Um, yeah, I don't know. I really don't know, because at the time, like I would have not even noticed parts, or like there was different, obviously you have conflicts, right? There's conflicts. There was conflicts in me of like, I want this and I want this, and they're kind of like move things
Mm,
that move in opposite
mm,
directions. So yeah, I don't know, it just, I think now landing in that modality so many years later, it just
mm.
makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So, like, do you want to just share for the listeners what kind of training you took when you finally went into deliberately coaching? And because you have been doing a lot of personal growth and doing all this, exploring different kind of, I think, yeah, Buddhism, you have a lot of explorations behind you that I saw in your videos. Do you want to share how you concluded to take that particular training that you did, and if you can share where you did it, maybe, and just how you, what kind of decision made you land on that particular modality?
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting because you started kind of the conversation with this question in a sense, and we kind of went down memory lane because to this kind
Mm,
of bad coaching experience I had, and then like kind of everything that unfolded afterwards. And I'll
Yeah.
get to that question in a second. I'll just mention two things, and one of them
Sure.
is
Sure.
related to us meeting. But um,
Yeah.
so another piece that was kind of big there was psychedelics. I feel like that,
Mm.
and it's interesting because I've used psychedelics a couple of times in my 20s,
Mm.
kind of just recreationally. And then, you know, through my jiu-jitsu teacher, I did a retreat. He like moved to Costa Rica, and I went and did a retreat. It was a really powerful retreat with him. And when I
Mm-hmm.
went there, he was like talking about his experiences with ayahuasca, and a couple of his friends were there too, and they were talking about how it was like, oh, it's some, you drink it and it tells you what to do, and then you kind of level up, and then tells you the next thing to do. Like that's how they framed it. So I was like, oh
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I need to do this, and that was kind of my gateway. He kind of hooked me up, he hooked me up with the shaman when I got back, and I ended
Oh.
up drinking ayahuasca, and then from there it was like exploring psychedelics for the next couple of years, and just a bunch of different experiences,
Mm-hmm.
not to go too much into them. So that was a big piece. And
Mm-hmm.
then meditation was there also. Like psychedelics just made me go deeper into meditation. And
Mm-hmm.
then I got into circling. Like years later,
Um,
I went to this monastery, and I monastic academy. I learned circling there. And
uh-huh.
then then I started circling on Circle Anywhere. I did the 6-month program with Circling Europe, did the
Mm-hmm.
SAS program, and became a facilitator with them, certified. And
Mm-hmm.
and through Circling Anywhere, that's where I met you. So we met through this
Yeah.
practice called circling, or like relayfulness.
Yes.
And that's an important thing to mention, because I think in circling, that's when I
Mm-hmm.
really started getting into the interpersonal stuff, and seeing how I impact people, and how I attune to people, and my kind
Mm-hmm.
of patterns of relating were being and my emotional patterns were kind of being brought to the surface through that practice.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and at that time, I also started working with my wife. She has a psychotherapy business, and with like 20 clinicians. So I was working with people, and I was kind of facilitating certain practices and certain things with the leadership team. So
Mm-hmm.
and I had the circling already, and I was like, oh, this is a great foundation. But then there was something I was like, it would be nice to have more skills to be able to
Mm-hmm.
work with people. And
Mm-hmm.
I think I saw at the time, it was on Daniel Thorson's podcast, Emerge. And
Yeah.
actually, when I went to Monastic Academy, he was one of the facilitators there, kind of teaching the circling modality. But later, I was like
Mm-hmm.
listening to his podcast, and he had this guy Steve March on the podcast, and he was talking
Mm-hmm.
about his kind of coaching method called Aletheia. And
Yeah.
yeah, it was just sounded very interesting. And I ended up, hitting him up, and I was like, hey, I went on his site, I read some of his articles, some of his stuff, and I was like, this is really interesting. And I ended
Mm.
up interviewing him on my podcast. And
Oh.
yeah, it was just really interesting what he was talking about, and kind of how he was framing coaching, very different
Mm.
than how I've heard before. And
Mm-hmm.
I want to say like a year later, that's when I signed up to his program. And
Mm.
yeah, it was an 8-month program, and I completed that past November, finished that.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it was just really really different, really cool, integrated a lot of different systems. It's also interesting to mention, like, Steve March's background. His teacher was actually one of my meditation teachers, which was Dan Brown. So he came up in this guy Dan Brown's meditation lineage. Like, he studied with him for years, and that's who I've been studying with. He passed away actually a couple of years ago. So there's also that kind of overlap coming up in a similar
Mm-hmm.
meditation tradition.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's some of the pieces there. Yeah.
Yeah. So it sounds like you were like the trajectory was kind of like more and more moving towards being of service for other people, also with your wife's team,
Yeah.
and it feels a very like natural path to kind of step into that final decision that being of service was something you, it sounds like you were cultivating a lot of skills and insight into yourself. And of course, that that helps a lot to have that strength and capabilities and skills to finally take the dive into being of service and being more directed outwardly. Imagine.
Yeah, yeah. You said it's kind of the natural movement, and I see that as being true. Like, I'm also very entrenched in developmental theories, and that's one of the things is you see in ego development and just in how humans develop. They move in
Mm,
that you move through this phase of being very individualized and
yeah.
individuated, and then at some point you start kind of deconstructing yourself and seeing like what is beyond
Mm,
that. And at one point it's completely okay to just work on yourself, right? But then at some
mm,
point it gets to like, okay, this is not enough. And I think that's something I realized like in the last couple of years of like, I didn't want to just develop myself. I didn't just want to actualize my own potential.
mm,
And actually my own potential, my actualizing my own potential was intertwined with my ability to help others actualize their
yeah.
potential. So
Yeah.
that kind of movement, yeah, it felt very natural, and it feels like that. It feels like that's where I'm at right now too. Like there's a
Mhm,
strong sense of I want to help other people too. Like I want to develop. I can't. I actually can't develop on my own. I can't just sit by myself
mhm.
and read books and meditate. I actually have to be in dialogue with other
Yeah.
people to develop.
Yeah, and I can see myself like I've been on the similar path as
Mm-hmm.
you, and get so much out of working with people like a coach fashion, because it also keeps me more grounded in the world, so to speak, and it's easy to it makes it harder to fall into prey for self-deception also, and all the humility you have to be aware and be uh, meet people where they're at, and that meeting of course is where also you got a lot of things reflected back to you, how people impact you again. So it's a I feel for me it's like a, a huge way to grow in a more wholesome way.
Yeah. Yeah. I think at some point that's where it's at. Like if you don't get into that relational space, and I'm not saying
Mm,
you have to do circling, right? But if you don't get to a place where you're getting honest feedback from people, like
mm,
you just can't. You just you collapse on yourself, and like you said, your own self deception. The ego is a
mm.
very cunning kind of mechanism, so
Yeah.
we just fool ourselves.
Yeah, yeah, totally. So, do you want to share a little bit about how that training, what it did to you after the circling, and you were interested in, and you had a teacher who had a similar meditation teacher?
Yeah, Steve March. He came through
Steve
the
Mark. Yeah.
yeah, he worked through the same kind of tradition, the pointing
So
out.
how was the journey? If you want to like, what did you have any? Yeah, I'm tempted to say like, did you have any? What was the biggest issue you stumbled upon in the training? If you want
Yeah,
to get like
yeah, no,
reveal something juicy.
yeah, yeah, for sure. I actually appreciate you asking this question. I had a lot of actually resistance to a lot of the stuff in the training, and
Uh-huh.
I was already familiar with uh, internal family systems and parts work before,
Hmm.
so I've already like read a decent amount about it.
Mm-hmm.
and done some of that stuff myself. But yeah, there was just a lot of, I guess I had to deal with certain parts, like the intellectual, like I have a very strong intellectual part, and
Mm-hmm.
like a part that wants to get somewhere, like the achieving, very strong achiever part. And
Mm-hmm.
those things were really kind of getting in the way because a lot of the process in that coaching is it's very kind of slow. It's very attuned. It's a lot of repeating and just tracking what the person is saying. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes that, there's a part of me that's just like, oh, this is, I want to get to the heart of the matter. Or it's like, I'll see something and I want to just point at it,
Mm-hmm.
but that's not how the
Yeah.
process works. So yeah,
Yeah.
I struggled with some of that stuff, and there was definitely some skeptical parts of me that I was like, all right, I don't know about this part of the method, or I don't know about this part of the method. But
Mm-hmm.
then when I actually practiced with people, whether it was them training me or me coaching them, every time, like pretty much every time, something would unfold that was like awesome or profound or insightful or helpful, like every time. And I was like, oh, I'm over here. Like whenever I think about the method, I have like an issue with it or a problem with it. But when I actually
Uh-huh.
do it, it works great.
So
Um,
that's it sounds like the part that wants to get somewhere and is very intellectual and loves systems and theory was kind of in a little conflict with that actually doing the process. And I remember in a session I was in with you. I'm curious if this is what, because you said something to me that I took as, let's see if I can get it. You said something that, yeah, you have to go, you're unusual because you have to go all the way before you get something out of it, or before you can conceptualize it, I think you said.
mhm.
And I'm curious, that suddenly makes more sense to me because you're so into theory and stuff. And and I, I'm not sure if this is just like that incident, but I'm curious about if you can remember that statement when you coached me. You said something like that.
Yeah, I don't know.
Maybe.
I don't know if I could remember the exact moment. What in hearing you say that, I think one of the things you've, I don't know if this is what you're pointing at, but I think you did say something like, oh, it takes you a while for things to kind of unfold. Like you have a kind of a cadence in the way that your
Yeah.
experience unfold. It takes time.
Yeah.
And I remember hearing that. I'm like, oh yeah, totally. Like I totally get
Mm,
that
mm,
it takes time, and like I'm here to give you that time and like allow you to slowly make sense of your experience. But I'm not exactly, I don't know if that's what you're
No,
pointing at there.
I'm asking because I'm curious about that. Maybe you're probably, I imagine, since you're into all these kind of frameworks, Ian McGilchrist's book
Yeah.
and research.
Hmm.
So I have a sense that you are kind of dominated left brain. Uh,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean that's actually one of my favorite books, The Master and His
uh,
Emissary. That was a huge shift because it was like illuminating all those patterns. And it's funny because my ayahuasca shaman, she told my wife, like, oh, this was years ago. She was like, oh, he's like very left brain dominant. And I remember she told me that, and I was like, what the fuck? I was like, what? But but it's true. It's absolutely true. It's just, and I think it's I don't think it's
mm,
just me. I think it's a culture. That's what
yeah,
he points out in the book. It's like we culturally
yeah,
have come to prioritize left
yeah,
brain ways of thinking. And that's very,
yeah.
it's very different. Like when I'm sitting and I'm reading and I'm writing and I'm studying theory, I'm in a
Mm-hmm,
very left brain kind of mode for sure. And then I go
mm-hmm,
and I'll circle, or I go and I
yeah,
coach somebody, and it's like I have to shift, right? There's
yeah,
it's a very different way of being with somebody than
yeah,
being with a book. or with writing.
Yeah. I think that's why I also like for me when I got that book, and I haven't read the whole book to be honest, but I got the gist of it, and for me it was a kind of a revelation also, as you're saying, like it illuminated my. I'm totally dominated by my right side, right hemisphere. So that's also, I remember, like I'm also, so for me, tracking and everything you did with brilliance when you coached me, you have a tremendous skill of tracking, in my experience. So, uh, but for me, that's really hard to do. Mm, and maybe you can also have a sense of that when we're speaking now, but because for me the gestalt is everything. Like understanding is based on the gestalt that suddenly appears for me, and also being emotionally, um, yeah, emotional. So yeah, but so you had some insights, it sounded like, when you read the book.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the whole, once again, like I said, it's one of my favorite books, and I just think he's highlighting
Mm,
a very real pattern in culture. And,
mm,
whether the anatomy stuff of the brain actually shifting and all that is correlated with that, I don't know. But is there a pattern of
yeah.
like being mechanical? Is there a pattern of being mechanical? Is there a pattern
Mm,
of leaning into technology, into
mm,
this perpetual growing pattern?
mm,
Yeah, I think that's true, and I think that this actually relates, right? This relates exactly to Steve March's method and the Aletheia coaching method. And
mm,
there's something he
yeah,
says, there's a shift in there, right? He says a lot of coaching methods function from a self-improvement paradigm. So they're based
mm,
on deficiency, right? There's something is missing, you have to get better. And he
mhm.
distinguishes that with self-unfolding. And
Oh, yeah.
unfolding is the fact that you're there. What if nothing is missing? What if you're already complete? What if you're already whole and this wholeness is here? There's just potentially obscurations. Things are kind of that obscuring your vision from seeing that. And that relates to McGilchrist's whole thing, because the linear
Mm,
thing is all about the left brain view is all about grasping. It's all about getting somewhere. It's all about becoming, attaining. And the right view is all about, this is just a boundless wholeness. It's
yeah.
like you said, it's the gestalt, it's the big picture, and it's
Oh,
everything is already here.
yeah.
So it
So
relates.
yeah, so we're a sentence I picked up from somewhere. We're always already in relationship. So the unfolding is about revealing the innate capacity, and all the parts is kind of obscuring that sense, that felt sense of being connected, or uh, being in flow, and uh, everything. So that, am I tracking you right?
Yeah, yeah, I think that's right. And I think in a way what the left brain processes do is they
Mm,
break things up into parts and
yeah.
categories and labels. That's what it does. So when
Yeah.
it's almost like when you're in that space, you collapse, you collapse into this way of perceiving, where it's like you could
Mm,
only see through this limited part, through this, and you become
mm,
identified with it rather than having the whole big picture when we're functioning from presence.
yeah. So how are you feeling right now?
Yeah,
Like right now, how is it?
yeah, no, I really appreciate your inquisitiveness and I think you were saying it's not easy for you to track or something, but I feel like you've been tracking me and asking really kind of poignant questions and helping me kind of just unpack my life story and the different trajectories and movements. So yeah, I have a lot of joy. I have a lot of joy. I feel like
Mm.
this is actually, I feel like I haven't had a conversation like this in a
Mm.
while. So really, really appreciate it. And I'm kind of wanting to flip it on you and to kind of just to see if you could share a little bit more of what your experience was like in
Mm.
practicing this unfolding coaching process with me.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. It was, as I was saying, like the level of tracking you did and organizing all the parts. It was a lot of parts at some points in our conversations, and it took me. I also, yeah. So it was. It felt very. How should I put it? It was very. It felt very safe that you were kind of organizing and tracking so accurately that made me kind of go deeper and deeper. And also your ability to sense where when I was blended. I remember a couple of times like I couldn't see that I was blended. And you pointed it out, and I think I had some resistance or something because, of course, when you're blended, you maybe have a protector part that's, but you did that a lot of times, and at some point I could kind of see when you, because you were so accurate in your tracking, that I noticed, oh shit, yeah, you're right, I was blended. And also the generosity when I kind of had a protector. Obviously, I remember distinctly. I think I texted you afterwards, and I was like, "Yeah, I think I had a lot of protector parts, and I was kind of not going along with your method, and I was very harsh in my judgments towards or my protector parts." And you were very gracious and like, yeah, if this works out for you, if you want to show up and be all blended with all of your parts, you're welcome to. And I remember how much appreciation for your capacity to not be triggered back at me. Like, so yeah, it was a very fruitful experience for me.
Mm.
So yeah, and yeah, so um that left brain, that's really helpful for this kind of work.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And
yeah,
also that attunement also sometimes, because I'm like the way we're maybe quite opposite, obviously, in how we function, and at times that was a little challenging for me because I also sensed that it was important, or you were really, and I appreciated that too, that you really honored the method, and you were very, you really want to hold on to that, and I imagine that's a value for you, like it's a strong value that you honor the method.
yeah. I just want to say, really appreciate you sharing those kind words. Means a lot to hear that,
Mm,
kind of hear the impact of um, the coaching and
mm,
in regards to the method and holding to the method. The way I see it is, um, there's something known as view, right? And this is whether it's in Buddhism or whether it's in any kind of practice, circling,
Mm,
same thing, right? There's a view, and a view is basically, one way to understand it is a way to drop our disbelief, right? So we're not we stop questioning something, and we're just like, okay, I'm gonna function
mm,
through this lens. And
mm,
one of the things that Steve Marsh he teaches about the view. He's like, you can't,
mm,
there's no practice that can work without you adopting the view. So you have to adopt the
mm.
view.
Yeah,
The view is not the ultimate way it is, right? Like internal family
yeah,
systems, parts work, unfolding,
mm,
any Buddhist view,
yeah,
it's not like the ultimate view. It's just a view.
mm,
It's a way of looking, and a
yeah,
particular way of looking produces a particular result. So that's why when I'm working with the method, we're agreeing to use the view to get a particular type of result. I'm
yeah,
willing to drop that view and go into a different view, but I work in particular in this method, and that's the one I've been trained in, and I've seen how it works. So yeah, I try to hold to that
yeah,
view to produce a
yeah.
particular result.
It's very helpful for me to hear that kind of framing, because I can totally relate to when I read different philosophies. I also see, like, you develop these kind of lenses of reading different kind of theories and models, and when I kind of something similar evokes from the background, because I'm so influenced by particularly John Vervaeke's work.
Yeah.
And so that huge framework he is arguing from awakening from the meaning crisis and after Socrates, and that's so helpful for me. And now that kind of framework has also allowed me to step into, actually, I'm amazed by, but now I'm reading a Norwegian book actually about Christianity or mysticism
Mm-hmm.
in a Christian tradition, and that framework comes up in the background and just helps me so much to develop a new set of view. And also, I was also, something occurred to me when you said, like, yeah, you have to adopt a kind of that view in order to do the structure or that kind of method. And something occurred to me also, like, if you have that structure, it's also easier to break it and trust the unfolding when you have rigorousness in that kind of view. And also sometimes, like, the underneath aspect of structure method, of course, is also the attunement, the unfolding itself in our experience, and that kind of vertical move we have to do, and also the horizontal in our attunement is also helping me to attune more to my verticality, or the shifts in energies. So I just wanted to throw that into the mix, because that's also, yeah, it takes me back actually to the nuance perspective that you mentioned earlier. The nuances and the complexity is where the structure and the theory meets the attunement, and the nuances and the subtleties that happens there is where, I guess, the magic happens.
Yeah, I think what you're pointing to is that there's a, there's reality can't be contained,
Mm,
or let's say the present evolving moment cannot be contained or confined by any
mm,
structure or view. But different lenses are helpful for
yeah,
producing a certain result at a certain time frame, and then
mm,
we have to let the lens go, or let the view go, and allow something new, a new view to bubble up, or a new interaction to
yeah,
happen between us. That's kind of beyond either. It's beyond me and it's beyond you. It's this,
yeah,
you can't control living a live
yeah,
experience.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, I noticed I had a lot of tension in the beginning of our conversation,
Mm,
and I noticed like more and more getting into a flow with you
mm,
and not being the interviewer kind of
yeah.
thing. It just dropped all the tension, and now I feel like we're more in the flow with
Yeah.
each other. Yeah.
Yeah, I actually appreciate dialogues, like more back and forth, better than
Mm,
interviews. But at certain times, once again, it's like a view, right? It's like you were
mm,
asking certain questions to kind of know where I was going from where I came from to get to where, and it was a kind of a linear story that I was unfolding, and then that lens kind of cracked, or we put it aside, and it moved into a
yeah.
more dynamic back and forth.
Yeah. Looks like you're doing jiu-jitsu again.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
You know what Vivek is saying about gestures? It strengthens our ability to speak. All the gesturing we're doing.
Yeah, yeah. Steve March had a whole thing about gestures too in
Mm,
in the training, and like just like the mudras, different mudras, like how we hold our hands, and like what
mm,
that gesture, that a mudra is a gesture. It's representing a certain
mm.
way of mind, a certain way of being. It's conveying something, right?
Yeah. So you were saying we were kind of leaping off a point or a question I had about what's the challenges. What would you say like the challenges was like have it done something or I have a sense of a question, but I'm not clear about it.
Mm-hmm. That's fine.
Is
So
it,
just articulate it best you can.
yeah. Uh, there's a curiosity here about like uh, do you see how do you see like the personal growth individually? And yeah, you were saying you have to have a service also in order to not go into self-deception or something like that. And
Yeah.
do you have maybe as a do you aspire to do something particularly with the coaching practice? Like, do you have any like persons you will prefer to work with, or is it like, yeah, curious about who you're kind of, if you picture your perfect client, so to speak, who would that be? And don't say Tony Robbins.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I appreciate it, because I've been chewing on this question for the last couple of months, and
Mm,
yeah, there's a lot of challenges there, because um, you know, providing coaching for free is not sustainable. So for me to be
yeah.
able to do that, I have to charge, and I have to charge enough where it's worth my energy. And
Mm,
so yeah, that's been a challenge, because really I feel like I want to help people going through a post conventional shift, and that can be kind of abstract for people that aren't aware of developmental frameworks, but really it's kind of people moving out of conventional ways of knowing and relating into
mm,
kind of these post-conventional ways where there's a sense of wanting to be in relationship. There's a sense of wanting to understand one's inner world and one's emotions. There's a sense of wanting to be in a deeper connection with nature. And there's a sense of kind of deconstructing yourself, like the whole self-deception thing, moving
Yeah.
beyond constructing a solid identity of this is who I am and I feel good being this person, to
Mm,
opening up to self as possibility, seeing how self changes and emerges, and
mhm.
how somebody else affects our sense of self.
Yeah.
So it's a
So
yeah.
self transcendence is what I'm getting from what you're saying. Like people who are deliberately doing stuff to unfold themselves and to maybe also be open for the mystical realm of being.
Yeah, I think it's, you know, definitely like for me, where I felt I was moving into that space was after kind of the psychedelic stuff. That's what really kind of, I think, kind of started catalyzing this post-conventional shift in myself. And I think for
Hmm.
some people that might be a potential pathway. They have a psychedelic experience, they
Yeah.
have a mystical experience, they feel like they connect with the divine or with God, or, you know,
Mm.
this bliss,
Yeah.
this everlasting bliss beyond space and time, and then they come back to the everyday life and they're like, how do I integrate this? Where do I
Yeah.
put this experience? So that's one
Yeah.
potential way of getting there. And it's it's
Mm.
it's weird how it happens, right? How that starts happening in us.
Uh,
You know, nobody really knows. It can happen in a so many ways. You could have a health scare, you lose a loved one, there could just be
yeah.
so much stress in your life, or it could be a spiritual experience, or you know, interpersonal conflict. Who knows
Mm.
what sparks that? But
Yeah. So
it's
you've been
yeah.
chewing on this question
Yeah.
for a couple of months, and so how's the chewing going?
Yeah, my jaw is hurting, bro. My jaw hurts. I mean, one, right, because the thing is, right, it has to be somebody that can afford the sessions. So I've been
Mm.
thinking about who can actually afford to pay me to do
Yeah.
this. You know, and
Yeah.
one kind of person that comes up, or one way of kind of segmenting a potential customer, is like a high achiever. It's somebody
Yeah.
who's done well in their career, who's done well professionally, who's
Yeah.
been like perpetually achieving. And
Mm.
I could relate with that because I have a very strong achiever, and I'm very about like I need to be productive. And
Yeah.
then there's something in that productivity, something in that chasing, that's
Yeah.
based on a deficiency. It's based on a lack,
Yeah.
and it can't get us right. It can get us it can help us become conventionally successful, but it
Yeah.
doesn't help us go beyond conventional success.
And that also is so telling for a high efficiency manager parts, or like, and also accumulating over time, at least some exiles, uh, because that's kind of also back to the culture framing, you know. It's so many people who are high achievers that is almost dying because they don't know what to do when suddenly they have to feel stuff, you know, because they're so like they're so used to suppressing it to be in order to be efficient.
That's so true. And you know, I can share from my own direct experience. Like right before I got on this call with you,
Mm,
I just today I feel very scattered. Like I felt very
mm,
scattered, and I just
mm,
couldn't get myself to kind of quote unquote be productive, right? Get something
mm.
done. And it's so
Yeah,
interesting what happens in my system, right? Of like this sense of groundlessness, this sense of not getting anywhere or not going anywhere,
yeah,
of not achieving. It can be it's very uncomfortable. And
yeah.
it's still a
Uh,
pattern that I navigate in myself. And I feel like I'm
mm,
becoming somewhat more skillful of navigating it. Um,
uh.
but it's very common, and it's a product. I feel it's a product of a hyper individualized, hyper productive, and a hyper
Yeah.
rational dominant culture that I'm a part of. Like, I'm a part of this culture. This is the dominant culture.
Yeah, we're totally embedded in the culture, whether we like it or not, and that's a part of the beauty. I think for me, at least, has been discovering internal family systems. Is that you can get a better lens or a view on that conditioning, and you can start to really sense into what's true, what's authentic in my experience, and you can start to see. And when you start to really sense into different parts of you and layers and all strategies and all everything, you get this total shift also in your perception, and you can start to see how how deeply how easy the culture can distract us and lead us stray and into self-deception and bad relationship, and that kind of tension that creates also a need to do the actual practices also, in order to, as I've in my journey, it's been like a constant developing of new frames, and that awareness also needs to be be emptied from time to time, so it doesn't overwhelm the system. So yeah, it's yeah. So, and I notice I'm leaping into the whole framework of John Vervaeke's and the ecology of practices, and like it makes sense, I guess, that you have to have you do studying, meditation, and now clients, and yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Vervaeke's obviously a very influential figure in the field and in the spaces we move in, and I completely agree. I completely agree with the ecology of practices and the fact
Mm.
that the only way that you move beyond conventional meaning making or this kind of culture is
Yeah.
by engaging in these kind of practices. One of the things, the post conventional shift is the realization, whether it comes through doing inner practice, but I think more so when it happens, we realize, oh, I probably need to meditate, or like it would probably be helpful for me to meditate, or it would be probably
Yeah.
helpful for me to journal or
Hmm.
to do
Yeah.
therapy or to circle. Because
Yeah.
if I don't do that, then I'm just going to be stuck in my own head and stuck in
Mm.
the dominant cultural frames, which is you need to
Yeah.
achieve and you need to be productive and you need to buy things and consume,
Yeah.
and there's no
Yeah, exactly.
reflecting.
So now you said something before I leaped off. You said like before you, just before you got onto this call, you felt scattered. And what's the state of being now?
Yeah, it's so interesting, actually. I feel it's really interesting. Right before I got on, I was like, what I feel right now is the opposite of flow, right? And
Uh,
flow being this kind of immersive
mm,
sense of just the self kind of receding, and things are seamless and things feel good and you just feel good.
mm,
And I'm like, this
yeah.
is the opposite. I'm like, what I'm feeling right now is the opposite of flow. So where flow is like the
Yeah.
best state, this is like, this sucks, right? And like in conversing with you, I feel
Mm,
like I've been in a flow state.
mm,
We're almost at like an hour and a half of chatting and it flew
yeah.
by. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's just completely shifted my state. And now I'm almost
Yeah.
thinking like, okay, maybe there was a reason why you couldn't do anything before, because it's like your energy wanted to be channeled through this conversation that I knew that I'd be having with you.
Yeah, I'm also felt very kind of I'm not particularly comfortable of trying to interview having in that role.
Mm.
So I was really tensed up, as I said, and so I'm really happy to hear that the shift that occurred for you as well as in me. I can like totally relate to your experience. So yeah, so this has been a real treat and pleasure to be with you. I'm taking on the interview hat.
Yeah, no, I was, yeah, I thought you did great. I was like, as you were kind of guiding it, I was like, oh, he's doing such a good job. Like that was just kind of like the
Oh,
voice.
really?
Yeah, yeah. I was like, oh, he's good. He's like natural interviewer. Very, very
Oh,
too.
no. Yeah,
Yeah.
I was really tensed up, but thank you for saying that. Yeah,
Yeah, that was my
great,
experience.
great. Yeah. So, yes, I'm looking forward to hear more about another time how, because I have the similar questioning that I'm chewing on, and I think I'm moving towards the high achievers also more and more, and they're everywhere, of course. So, um, and yeah, so I'll be curious to hear more, and maybe we can have some conversations about that, because that's a tricky thing to kind of and marketing for me is not my cup of tea, but yeah, just a proposal. But I just want to, before we stop the recording, or you stop the recording, I just want to thank you so much, Artem, for being willing to do this, and I'm happy that we got into a more dialogical flow, back and forth, as you said. Felt more natural for me too. So yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
thank you.
No, yeah. Appreciate you. Really appreciate you. Felt very generative and wholesome conversation. Thanks so much, Jan.
Thank you.